Hello and welcome. Welcome to this session on mutant myth worlds, which is all about one of my very favorite topics in the world, which is storytelling. I'm thrilled to be here. Welcome to all those here in the room. Welcome to all those online. Welcome to those of the future who will be watching us someday. I'm delighted to join you here today with three guests. One who's calling in from Mumbai. Welcome, Sahej. We haven't actually got to meet yet. And here with me on the couch, Ibelisse and Erik, who I got to know during the Reassemble World Weaving workshop this summer. So it's the first time we actually meet in real life this week. So it's an amazing reunion. Today, within the theme of mutation, is all about storytelling. And now there's this premise that if we change the stories we tell, we can change the world. Now, what does that mean? I asked myself this question already in the past months. What is a world, actually? What do we mean when we say a world? We have the Earth, the planet, just one of them, right? And yet within this world, there are many worlds. And not only made up of bits and atoms, of rocks, of trees, of critters, of cells, of living and breathing, but of ideas, of words, the stories we tell each other, the stories we tell ourselves. Many of the toxic myths that have made the destruction of our planet possible, the myth of progress, the myth of endless growth, yes. The idea that we're separate somehow from each other. The idea that human beings would be superior somehow to other animals. These are stories that we've told ourselves and each other that have got us in this place. So there's some hope that if we change the story, we can change the world. The worlds, perhaps we could say, even. Creating worlds within this world. Today we're going to be going behind the tapestry of storytelling. Not only telling those stories, but looking at how they're made, how they're crafted, with three storytellers who I'm delighted to introduce to you today. I'll start off with introducing our first speaker, Sahej Rahal, who's calling in from Mumbai. Hi there. Welcome. Who is primarily a storyteller, perfect for today. He weaves together fact and fiction to create counter-mythologies that interrogate narratives that shape the present. His myth world takes the shape of sculptures, performances, films, paintings, installations, and AI programs that he creates by drawing upon sources ranging from local legends to science fiction, rendering scenarios where indeterminate beings emerge from the cracks in our civilization. Instead of reading you the long list of awards and prizes and shows, which include Vancouver Biennale, Melbourne, Glasgow, etc., I've chosen to instead read a tiny excerpt from his website, which is a story. Do look up the awards. They're well-deserved. He writes, "There must be a book of wonders in the ruins of the library of the old empire that might yet draw one of those creatures in. There must be an apocryphal tale of a traveler from the north in which their detached shadows might still lurk. They emerge from the desire to speak about the vastness of this and every land. Their tools are weapons here. Their ballads are prophecies." To me, this says more than the awards. I hope you don't mind. A warm welcome to you, as you'll be presenting to us some of your storytelling projects of the past, of the recent past. Welcome.
Hi, and thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I just wanted to say that the text that you read out was written by a friend of mine who's a writer, Zeenat Nagri. And so just to give you a sense of what it is, what I do is like when I make work and then put up a show, I invite my friends to kind of reimagine the work in their own bringing their own sort of memories and their imagination to it. And that text is actually written by her, and yeah, I actually love it quite a bit. So thank you for reading it. um, and with that, maybe I can kind of take you through some of my work. So I'm just going to turn on screen share. Sorry. Um,
Maybe while that's happening, I can introduce our other two speakers and we can get the technical things. So after this part of introduction, we'll be moving to Ibelisse Guardia Ferragutti. I hope I say your name properly. Who is a performer, vocalist, musician, and shapeshifter. You'll be able to see her shapeshifting and performing this evening at 9:30. She explores the interdisciplinary practice between these spaces of performing, where she acknowledges those mediums as territories that invite for sonic and performative embodiment. Born in Bolivia, she grew up in Brazil and now resides in Amsterdam, where she actively works in the fields of performance art and music. I had the pleasure of seeing Ibelisse also open the Fiber Festival with her incantations, bringing in these channelings energy. So, yes, today she'll be taking us behind some of the things she's thinking about at the moment. And then next to her is Erik. Erik Peters is an artist and designer focusing on collaborative world building through audiovisual, mixed media projects based on speculative and immersive storytelling. Exploring ecology and technology through a queer lens, he imagines alternative futures and more than human perspectives within an extended ecosystem of interdependencies. Looking forward to this queer universe that you'll be bringing with us. All right. I think in the meanwhile, the screen has been shared, so take it away.
Thank you, and I'm also excited to kind of, I guess, collectively conjure with you both as well. So, okay, just diving in. So I'm Sahej. Hi, I'm from Mumbai, and yeah, born and brought up. And my entire kind of practice is basically this, unfolding mythology that's sort of expanding into like into the real world or into our worlds or the worlds that we inhabit through the cracks. And the way I put this together is using found objects, so bits of furniture, grass, literally whatever I can find, and then try to sort of negotiate with these objects that I find, and then give shape to this unfolding mythology. And the way it works is like, it sort of becomes like it's almost like, what does the world sort of offer you to kind of create with? And then that's where these objects come from. I also start using them as props in performances where, they become headdresses, or like that pipe that I'm holding is actually it sort of plays like a didgeridoo. And so what happens is like the characters of these sort of this universe kind of start, passing through spaces of commute and kind of performing these really absurd rituals. And then those rituals and these objects that they kind of leave behind become sort of, artifacts of that civilization. And then they also kind of invite like people to basically give meaning to them and like, kind of reshape them with their own imaginations. So in that way, the work is sort of this invitation to imagine what these remnants of this civilization are, and what was the sort of shape of it. So this is work from like 2014, actually, where this was part of the Kochi Biennale in Kerala, and I was making like about, I was in Kerala for about like a year, and I ended up making almost like, I keep losing count. I think it was like 800 sculptures or something like that in this abandoned laboratory space So these kind of bathroom tiles that you see on the walls, those are the standard kind of tiles that you'll have. Like, these are the ones we had in school as well, in our laboratories. And what you encounter is like these strange sort of like, objects in the sinks and like, just kind of like sprawling through the space. Like some of them are more monumental and abstract, just like kind of lurching onto and falling apart, like, yeah, and then, it sort of becomes like this invitation for everyone to kind of put together who left them behind. The way I was creating them was also from like, the afterlife of cinema in a way, because the site where this was installed, where the Biennale happens, when it's not on, the site is actually used for like, shooting films and like advertising. So every time there would be like a film shooting happening, once they'd leave, I'd kind of go and raid the sets and then bring like, materials to kind of work with. So it's sort of like built on the afterlife of cinema in a way. Yeah. And then there's also these kind of paintings that I make, which are actually part of like an ongoing illuminated manuscript. So like, it's sort of this, like, Borges has this like kind of book of imaginary beings, or there's this sort of Islamic text called the Ajaib al-Makhluqat, which is sort of, it means the wonders of creation. And it's sort of like, a compendium of all kinds of animals that have been like, not just seen in real life, but also imagined. And the idea was to kind of create this book, except that like you see, like, all the pages are different sizes. And that's how it's sort of revealing itself as well. Like, the shape of the book is changing. So you've got like, paintings which are like 7 feet, some of them are like really tiny. And then you're kind of getting these animals that are sort of, yeah, like, I mean, a lot of this also comes in from like kind of like Jataka tales, which are sort of like Indian folklore, and they sort of become these, I mean, they're sort of like indeterminate in the way that like you're sort of invited to kind of make stories with them as well. Even though I have like my own kind of like hidden stories that I like kind of leave behind. Um, and yeah, there's like more characters. Like just to give an example of one of the stories, so like, here the tiger has these like sort of spots that sort of like, kind of move like almost to hypnotize its prey. And then, but again, like, I mean, more interested in the stories that people make with them rather than my own. Um, so yeah, that. And then, okay, so while I'm kind of creating this like mythology or this civilization that's sort of unfolding in our world, I've been creating this series of sculptures called walkers. Um, and again, they're made with like things I find. And, so there's polyester fur and like, polyurethane, clay, plaster, whatever I can get my hands on basically. Um, and so, they've sort of been like kind of popping up across wherever like, this sort of civilization unfolds, using the things from the sites that I work in. So like this one that you're looking at right now was actually made using objects that I found in there's this museum in Bombay called the Bhawdaji Lad, which was sort of a satellite museum of the Victoria and Albert Museum. And anyway, what happened was like it's next to a zoo and it's a sort of colonial museum. So it sort of has this strange kind of history where it's got like it's next to a zoo and then next to a botanical garden. All in the same compound. And anyway, these parts were kind of gotten from the zoo. And it's also got like this strange kind of history where, it was like, the you kind of see the colonial kind of gaze very manifest in these spaces where like, okay, here's where you look at the animals, here's where you look at the plants, and then here's where you look at the people of the subcontinent. And anyway, so that was kind of like taking that and then creating some kind of strange creature that's almost like trying to leave the museum grounds. And then there's smaller ones which I make with coat hangers. Yeah, and then like, I mean, literally what I can find. So like parts of a tree. And the fun thing about this one is like there's nothing really holding it together. Like it's just like there's 3 branches that are just like kind of holding themselves together. And then there's this bit of fur that I found that was just like tied on top of it. So yeah, it's sort of like this kind of negotiation with gravity in a way, I mean, I forget who said it, but there was this like really cool line about like, how sculpture is like a rebellion against gravity, and this piece kind of like does that for me because it's literally just standing by itself. I had very little to do with it. Okay, so now I've been creating these sculptures. I'm just gonna turn off the screen share, um, and we can go to the videos. Um, yeah. So if I can just, you can hear me, right? Like, yeah. Okay. So what's happening here is like I'm guessing you're hearing the audio of the drum that I'm playing as well. Cool. So essentially, what's happening here is like I started creating AI programs that respond to sound, and so the sort of like the idea for the shape of these AI programs was like taken from the walkers that I've been creating. But then at the same time, like there's AI scripts that like really basic kind of AI scripts that are used for like guiding non-player characters in video games that are attached to the limbs of these beings. And what happens is they start sort of responding to sound, and then like so the way to think about it is like there's the mind and the limb of these creatures like kind of collapsed into one. And if you could just pause the video really quickly, I'll just kind of introduce this one. Yeah, thanks. Sorry. So anyway, so that's how the AI program's playing out. And what happens in the program itself is that like the sort of mind and the limb is kind of collapsed onto one, sort of dislodging that hierarchy between mind and limb. A reason to do this was also that like, one of the sort of fundamental myths that kind of governs Indian society today is this like kind of hierarchical myth of of caste, which basically is kind of it's sort of like how do you say, like, I mean, the way it's manifested is like there's a story of this man who's kind of at the center of the universe, and it's kind of funny because like you need a man at the center of the universe to kind of like have this like strange patriarchal and oppressive system. Anyway, so there's the myth of a man, and what happens is like this cosmic man's head becomes the higher caste and his feet become the lower caste, and like they're born from those parts of his body, and everyone who lies outside of that body is like kind of not part of society. So like people from other faiths, or people who decide to like kind of, I mean, are atheist or whatever, don't belong. And now the idea here was to kind of challenge that myth with what if we can conceive of a being, be it a post-human or beings of the future. Like, what if we could conceive of a being where that hierarchy of mind and limb has collapsed? And that's essentially what these creatures are, like, because they've got like a congregation of minds rather than a single, division between mind and limb. Right. So now what I did, like the video that you're about to see, is basically I shot, like, kind of captured video in the AI programs, and then like kind of got them to respond to my own voice and kind of put together this story. So now you can play it.
Universe afresh. For Allah is unconstrained by the burden of following cause with effect. Every quantized instant of time presents Allah with an occasion to create a fresh set of accidents. Al-Ghazali admits that every now and then Allah might recreate the same set of accidents for the sake of regularity. However, this apparent regularity does not necessarily imply causality. An effect may or may not follow the cause. In Bombay, this state of affairs is explained with a time-worn term, SHA, or it is like that only, an idea that roughly compares to accidentalism, a doctrine that claims any attempt at comprehending the universe devoid of chance is an exercise doomed to fail, for the universe is incomplete without chaos. This doctrine sets the table upon which physicists, theologians, philosophers, astronomers, and politicians gamble for the true shape of the universe. Laplace's all-knowing, all-seeing demon finds no seat at this table, and neither there's a god that refuses to play dice. On certain nights, the chips belong to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, a secret rule that holds true in the shadow movements of both spycraft and subatomic particles. The more one knows of your position, the lesser is known of your movement, with the inverse also being true. The uncertainty principle is a game of bait and switch played on the ethereal edge of reality. On other nights, the celestial chaos of the universe takes the shape of the Boltzmann brain, a mind that imagines itself into existence and, by extension, imagines the entire universe. It then imagines itself as an intelligent observer within this complex conjuration, complete with a fictional backstory rife with memories and desire, all held together on mere chance. Every once in a while, the winning hand is held in the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, proposed by Henry Everett II. Incidentally, this interpretation of the world at large holds within itself all the other hands that have been both won and lost simultaneously and in superimposed timelines. In the year 1957, Henry wagered that the ultimate shape of reality is one that seekers of ancient artifacts, lovers, and revolutionaries have known all too well. The universe is the shape of all possibilities. Nothing is ever lost.
Cool. So there's, I guess we have time for one more video, which is, so it's basically, I was wondering if you could share it on the screen. There you go. So this is actually a project that I've been working on for about like the past year, and it's not ready. It's like I'm kind of like still working on it, and there's going to be a lot of changes that will come. But it's a video game where you play as this sentient robot who has a non-human organism that is its companion, and you need to sort of move through this environment. And essentially what happens is like it becomes a negotiation between the creature and the player, where you kind of, you try to figure out how the creature with all these like multiple limbs like navigates the environment, and then like, there's parts where it won't be able to traverse, and there's parts where you would be able to climb. So you need to kind of help it move through the space. And yeah, like, the idea here was to kind of think about what would, like what would a conversation between like two post-humans be like, or what would the shape of that kind of a bond be like, and how are we able to sort of engage with it in some way outside of like, the kind of telos of, right now, the way we kind of engage with technology or like new technology, particularly AI, is that it is this tool of efficiency, right? Like it's this thing that's supposed to make our lives perfect. Like, it'll take us to the, it'll give us the perfect directions from one place to the other, or it'll find us the perfect life partners. So there's this telos of like perfection and efficiency, which is sort of applied. But at the same time, what that does is like it kind of, flattens and normalizes us onto that telos of like efficiency as well, right? Like, the kind of chaos and the messiness of life sort of gets flattened into those like into that narrative of efficiency. So my entire kind of like engagement with AI, and like, I'd just like to say that it's really simple AI. Like, I mean, there's no machine learning or anything like that that's involved. I use like really basic kind of technology. Is to just kind of like tease out what are the possibilities of like cohabiting with these systems that are like increasingly part of our sort of everyday lives, and would we be able to like kind of speak to them, sing with them, those are the kind of uh, broad strokes sort of like ideas that I want to kind of play with. um, yeah that's kind of all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wish you could just stay there in that world for a while. So here we are, in this worlds that you're creating here, with this abundance of creation. It seems like you're working through contemporary and future issues through new kinds of collaboration with these new technologies. One tiny question before we move to the next speaker. I'm curious, in a way, the question you're asking in this last piece, this negotiation between a creature and companion, is perhaps also a question of how do you collaborate with these tools yourself as a maker, using these AIs? What do you know more about these tools by the collaboration with going from the analog to the digital realm?
Thank you. So that's actually I kind of don't see a difference in the sense that like, I mean, even though I do kind of write code and stuff like that, a lot of the so like, I mean, I had like a basic kind of understanding of programming, like, when I was younger, but I figured out how to use these programs purely through YouTube and like, kind of going over like a GitHub and like, on like a bunch of Discord channels and like that. And usually what happens is like, you'll find things that like people are like, okay, here's a bunch of code that I'm not using. Why don't you try doing something with it? Like there's a lot of, abandoned code. Sometimes like people actually give you solutions. They'll be like, okay, this is what you're doing wrong. You need to, and essentially what happens is like the code that you write is like a collage of everyone's kind of input, like, where everyone's kind of like dotted your T's and things like that. Uh, and yeah, that's kind of like how I create these sculptures as well. Like, it's not particularly in the sense like, these are obviously more like kind of materially, like I play with them and all that, but it's also like, what do I find? And like, I mean, how do those things kind of sit together? So there's that similarity of approach, which I feel like, I mean, a lot of like people who are kind of working with like, sort of moving between media in that sense are like kind of bringing in, kind of swapping those skills in that way.
So it really
Yeah, and
it really is a process of co-creation then, with the tools, but also with a whole community of Discord users and people hanging out on these channels. So in a sense, you're already in a virtual world as you're creating these. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to discussing more with the three of us in a bit. But I would like to pass on to Ibelisse, who will be taking us into some of the things you're working on right now. Go ahead.
Yes. I have to open here a little thingy. Yes. Okay. I think it's working well. Hello, I am Ibelisse, clearly. Thank you, Fiber, and everybody for being here. It's so nice to talk to everybody and just be in this environment again live. Thank you, Sahej, for this amazing talk. Whoa, it's so inspiring. Goodness gracious. I want to move to Mumbai. No. So tonight, this afternoon, I would like to talk about an ongoing process that I've been going through many years, and in the moment right now, and in the future, I suppose. And it's something I developed also, among others, in the Reassemble with Worlds with Fiber workshop, but I've been working for a long time. And I must say that it's just actually a rumble of a lot of tentacular approaches to maybe finding a centeredness within that in order to manifest it in the things I do, which are mainly in the sonic, performative, vocal outputs, but I am very much interested in also getting into the virtual reality realms. So I named it for now Strange Quarters, adaptable embodiment for a post-scarcity era. If adaptation is the necessity for survival, and if we are the embodiment of a historic trauma collective, we are already science fiction walking around on two legs. We know our ancestor dreamed us up and bent reality to create us. Quote, Walida y Marisha from Octavia Butler's Brood book. And that picture is from a dance in Bolivia, which I already find pretty science fiction. We are trying to embody the colonizers' long story. I'm going to tell you another time. But I really feel that that photo and that sentences really represent what I'm at this moment downloading, so to say. I am born in Bolivia. I grew up in Brazil, or at least those are the names of these countries at the moment. And I really have a very deep influence by having grown up in both of these places. I am based in Amsterdam, and yet I do feel that by growing up in those places, I have to say that I feel like I've been walking, perhaps sometimes, in what we call or recognize as science fiction within our reality, and it has to do that from that reality there is so much extremities and so much multidimensionality in the reality already that perhaps I recognize it as a kind of science fiction with a lot of humor and poetry, and yet a lot of misery, and yet a lot of things. Strange Quarters is a tentacular, speculative realm where we open doors to a multiverse of realities, departing from the Andean point of view of categorization of worlds and knowing those worlds are part of a larger network. Strange Quarters unshackles and re-renders these worlds into a variety of vibes, or at least I will hope to do that. We conjure this space as vital for integrating magic, mystic doings, mythology, and buried storytelling dust as a process of decolonization. These Andean worlds are divided in three categories: the Hanach Pacha, which is the upper world, the Kai Pacha is the middle world, and the Uhuch Pacha is the underworld. They will characterize cognitive dialogues and embody visions towards our poverty-focused behavioral systems, weaving the remembering, and I always like to think about remembering like putting our members together back, of lost threads as a necessity that arises to engage in post-activist acts, to build mystic utopians or good places, to recenter listening, embodiment, and the foul sense of the human versus point of view. And this is a little bit of an essay that I wrote to kind of have a bit of a root seeking of what I'm trying to talk about. So I will explain you how I got here. How did I get here? In my process of decolonization, I had to dig very deep in my post-colonial fugitive body, and I am borrowing this fugitive body from Bayo Akomolafe, a really dear teacher of mine. Among other cracks, I have stepped into what I call ancestral voicing. What does that mean? I collected stories, I embodied rituals and ceremonies, and I kind of went to listen other narratives than my Western academic schooling. And some of those cracks that really opened me heavily was a ceremony that I would like to share with you, and that is called Puchlae. That's from Bolivia. And I've been in that ceremony many times, but I just saw one layer of it every time we got really drunk and it was heavy. And danced the whole night and it was like, ah! But I never saw the incredibly woven complexity of what was actually happening. And I would like to share that with you. And this crack really meant a lot for me. This Puchlae means literally game or play, to play together. And this, among others, is the Tarabuco people that do this journey, and it actually lasts 4 months in total. Yes, very long. And I call it animistic dialogue for now. They collaborate with each other, with their environment, and with more than human voices in order to ask permission for the complex realities of just having crops of food, good shelter, and to just actually pay gratitude to the environment that they can be there. And how this goes, I'm going to show you a tiny little video of their dancing. That's it. I thought I can, once I want the link, I can show you and we can talk much more about this. But what it was saying in the letters, I'm going to explain you right now how this ritual goes. So it starts in the middle of November, more or less, and it ends up in March. In the middle of November, some kinds of trees are ripe to be harvested, and they take this wood and they make these flutes, which are called pinquillos, which are the colors of other voices, these flutes. And a group of people, they go to wells of water, especially when the waters are falling to the ground, so cascades, little water that falls. And they go to these places and they go to tune their instruments in this water. So they put the instruments close to the water. They go away because they are not allowed to be there when the instruments are being tuned. So they go away. The instrument spends the whole night with the water. And it is said that the sirinus, which later on the colonizers interpreted as these female sirenas or mermaids, but actually is for us a non-binary, non-gender being that lives in the water, and it's whispering the frequencies, so to say, or the tuning the frequencies for the next season. Once these instruments are tuned in, they pick up these instruments next day and they play these instruments for 4 months on a row, these frequencies that have been tuned by the sirinus. So let's say Shailoh plays in the morning, I play in the afternoon, you play in the you play in the... So it has, it's like the largest drone festival on Earth. And yeah, I don't know if they do it anymore like for 4 months, but it used to be like that. And the idea is not so much to play for each other, but actually we are playing for the environment, for the crops to grow. It's a way like they pick up the voices of the sirinus, because these are sacred voices that travel through water, that pick up the information from the underworld and the upper world. And then they tune these instruments so that these frequencies we are telling to the earth and to the upper worlds, we are telling them we are here and we would like to have food. For the next season. This is a carpet. Another group starts weaving a carpet, and what these carpets mean is, if you see in the middle, there is a line, and that is the Kaipacha, the middle world, where we, the humans, live. And there is a mirror image where you have upper world and underworld, so they are in the mirror because we don't know exactly how these worlds are, at least that's how they say, and they translate these frequencies of the sirinus on a graphic way. It has been discovered, and that's me trying to play some carpets in a performance. And someone made a study that the line of the Kaipacha, so the middle world, it's a B flat, in Spanish CB. And it seems like, it's very polyphonic, of course, and then the flutes always go, not always, but per season they vary between F and A flat and E flat and D flat. Kaipacha, middle world, B flat, and then they go to the underworld. And this is, so to say, the musical and the textile space. This is, as we all know, like the route of the water, because what they say is that the sirinus, they go underworld, they transpire, they go to the upper world, they rain again, and so they, by traveling through all these worlds, they give us the information of this next season, these frequencies for the next season, and that is a cascade where actually they go. And why do they use the cascade? Is because when the water falls, it goes deeper down, but it also splashes up. So it's a double movement going up and down, meaning there is a meeting between these three worlds, kaleidoscopically, watery-wise. So the water is the magical element that brings the frequencies of all these worlds together. chapter 1, I made a project a couple of years ago where I discovered, and sorry, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I didn't know at that point that the first computer was made out of the inspiration of the weaving machine, the telar do jacquard, because of the 001s. For me, that was a great discovery back then, because I realized, oh, maybe I could start weaving with computer information, with digital information. We created an algorithm that was translating live our concert or music sonic information into pitch and all these elements, and then we made a digital carpet that was being woven. That's me jumping around, and then you have the middle world, and then the two worlds that start weaving in this pattern. This is an interpretation of the colonizers, of the women being the mermaids and the men picking up the information from the ladies of the water. But that's like how we learned, and then I unlearned it, luckily, that it was nothing like that. Chapter 2, I would like to keep on working on this and collaborate with more virtual reality realms, as well as performative realms, and I would like to go even deeper in every one of these worlds. The Hanach Pacha, which is an abstract Ayllu. An Ayllu, I will explain a little bit what it is in a little bit. So I'm asking myself if all these things, in all these realities of celebration, for me suddenly, thanks to the Spuchlia, I started seeing the world as actually a carpet, like a woven carpet full of threads. Like that's what they taught me. And when I was thinking about these threads, I was thinking like, okay, but what is the original thread? And I came to across this article that says that ethylonamine, it's a chemical component made of oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and carbon. It is a component that exists in all of the beings of the universe, including the stars and us and the earth and everything. I was just speculating, would that be the original thread? And where are we gonna? So this is just completely speculative. And it looks like this, the ethylonamine. The second realm is the Kai Pacha, the human Ayllu, the world of the humans. And I'm still investigating what I would like to do with that. So I'm not as far as Sahej, but super inspiring to see it. But one of the things that I really love is there is a whole reclaiming of space and color and ritual in Bolivia. And there are these houses that are called utas or cholets that people are making in La Paz, in El Alto. And they say that the utas cannot be static or dead. It has to have life, it has to dance and move among communities. I even can imagine that some habitats could exist without the humans with it, that they could be dancing houses, I don't know yet, but I'm speculating on how to go even deeper in Kai Pacha or the human Ayllu. And you have the underworld, which is nature or magic Ayllu, the Ujuj Pacha. And it's a space for the parliament of things, plants, animals. All of these realms have also animal spirits, but we're not going to go there now. It's of nature. And here I have a kind of dream that will be a place where we all shapeshift, dream. There are all kinds of nests. I made this nest for an art route the other in spring. And we all shapeshift between animals, between plants, and it's actually a realm to sleep and to dream. I'm really inspired by this Chinese new movement that is called Tang Ping, that it's that all the youngsters, they are now taking naps in between work because they are tired of working 24/7. I think we should all do that more. That's one inspiration. So this is just to give you a little bit idea of this. These things. And well, Ayllu are all these spaces. Ayllu is like a space, but it's a name for community, for not only humans, but all what exists is part of it. Like the woven carpet, every single thread of existence belongs to Ayllu. Humans, plants, mineral rivers, animals, mountains, and so on. All the threads are seen as an extension of oneself, making every entity an extension of our body. The fabric cannot exist without every thread. The thread cannot exist without its trickster, multidimensional fabric. As you can see, I am super inspired by the Andean diaspora and the negotiation between these worlds, which are in a way very spiritual, but in a way for me very terrestrial, and how these people in the Andes, they somehow through frequential intelligence or frequential technology are able to sing or move or go along with this, for instance, Sirinus. And I would really like to see how my goal is how to bring back playfulness in these oppression cycles, how to bring back slowing down, how to bring back a much more sensorial relation with modern humans. And another little thing I wanted to say, that beside the ecological catastrophe, at least in South America, I think we kind of are in a bit of a post-apocalyptic time anyway, so I feel like we are weaving it from maybe another departure point, so to say. So we are maybe, I don't know, I cannot assume for everybody, but I at least I really would like to thread a bit more without making these spaces of mysticism or of mythology super strange. They are strange quarters, but maybe they are not. Maybe there's what we need to breathe further in resonating together. Thank you.
Today I'm learning not only new stories, but many new words. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for taking us into this realm where the Andean cosmology also translates in different media, different places, different times, sort of inhabiting perhaps worlds that were always already there, but we didn't know how to access them, it seems like. In this process of decolonization that you're going through this, I in the first presentation and now again, I'm just struck by how much damage has been done by this monotheistic enlightenment weird mutant of capitalism and hierarchies of humans. How do you decolonize these kind of things? Before we go to the next one, what does it take for you to tap back into these? And how let's say being here in Amsterdam now, in Europe, at the center of colonial power, from here, right behind us here, these were the gallows, warning people coming on ships coming through, and these were really at the center of the seat of power that spread so many of these other myths. What toolbox of decolonization are we talking about?
Yeah, it's for me at least is a long process, and I'm totally like not there. I'm not saying that I know everything about the colonialism, but I do know that I had to allow grief to be part of my daily practice. If I didn't have grief, I couldn't make space. I felt like grief is a really, for me, very powerful tool I discovered at a certain point, thanks to this magical, and among other magical people. I started understanding what was embodiment, grief as an embodiment, to really recognize these things and stop in our justice system, it's like, you, and not you, and not this, and the blame game. I realized like it's not about blame, it's about I and maybe my ancestors through me, or I need to grieve. I need to acknowledge in order to make space. That was, I feel like, one of the strongest tools I discovered until now.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Times of mourning. Erik.
Yeah.
I'm so curious about what you'll be taking us into in this next cosmology.
Yeah, me too.
Yes.
I think it's almost being shared to be a black screen. Yeah, perfect. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Erik Peters, and I've also been working on the Fiber Reassemble Lab this summer. And one of the projects that I developed there is called How to Wake Up the Ghosts. So my practice at large, I would say, is about collaborative world building. So there's never a project that I do by myself, which is really nice because I like talking to people and working with people, but also with non-human entities. So there's also AI involved and GPT-2 models and all kinds of beings. And How to Wake Up the Ghosts, kind of originated from this publication that I found online, I think about 2 years ago, with images of coral. So I think it's a publication out of 1756, and this person just kept finding dead coral on the beach, and he would take it home, and he would put like a little theater set with these dead corals, and he would draw it, and that was kind of his thing. And he was an influential guy, and he had influential friends. So through those friends, he got in contact with the Princess of Wales to be entertained by these illustrations. And I don't know why this publication caught my attention so much, but since then I've kind of been thinking about this way of how technology mediates our perception of nature, because this was the only way for people to kind of know what coral would look like, because there was no photography, there was no diving equipment, there were no ways to actually explore or experience what's happening so low in the sea. So I started experimenting with like different ways to represent that same coral, and one of those ways was by 3D printing. Kind of in the middle of that process, I was kind of thinking like, well, this is kind of fucked up. Like here I am exploring this like corals and stuff using plastic as one of the materials that is actually endangering these coral pieces, because coral reefs are very, very endangered, as you probably all know. So that kind of got me into the research of what are we doing to kind of counter that endangerment. And one of those ways, turns out, is by 3D printing coral structures and dropping them in the sea, so coral grows quicker. Like these structures can also be ships, like they are already in the sea, but laboratories and universities are developing these specially designed, like nicely sleek looking objects that help coral grow faster. And that kind of got me thinking, okay, like imagine we get into some kind of future and we're too late, and this coral, this coral, cease to exist. And the only thing that stays behind are all of these human-printed coral reefs. And there might be a future in which the only thing close enough to actual coral might be these human-printed coral reefs. So that's kind of this kind of little universe that I started exploring. So when I say world building, it's not usually an entire world by itself, but it's glimpses of these worlds, and maybe also more glimpses of the steps that we might take or that we might be taking before we get to that kind of world. So How to Wake Up the Ghost is a sculpture and like film installation that tries to give a voice to these entities in the sea that are human printed, but then kind of became the coral that they were representing. So they're kind of, the ghosts are like the souls of the natural coral are still somewhere in the ocean, and they are still there, the structures, because it's plastic, or it's also made with clay and like some different materials. But yeah, that's kind of what I started doing. And to write the story for this, I also collaborated with Lorena from Reassemble Lab, and we trained 2 GPT-2 models on different philosophers and texts by Donna Hathaway, Bruno Latour, Timothy Morton, to kind of try and give this coral that is a plural entity also plural perspectives, and kind of move beyond the perspectives that we have. And that kind of sounds like this.
Container of ghosts and souls. The cartographies of the early corals taught us water, temperature, the liminalities of living and non-living. We feel it in the flow of the water. In the movements of the fish, we are surrounded and embraced. The memory of the ocean, of the moon and the stars, the sky and the animals, the living and dead, shapes the currents that trace the souls and ghosts of the earth to these places of no return. We are but a shell, covered and enclosed, but the sea does not forget. We're ghosts in shells, and the white lights in gloves holding each other tight. There is no other connection with the living world like this. Our various bodies make up this place. For the otherness of the earth that we have inherited, it's queer, playful and wild, like the ghostly light of 1,000 suns, with unspoken words that designate the material and the flesh, the moist and the burning. An imposterous landscape remains. The abyss is not an empty container, but rather a surging crowd of beings, filled with a sense of desperation and urgency. To give rest, to linger and to reconcile, the possibility of restoring the broken with one another. Living in a state of darkness, our dark scales reflect the dim light of the water below. We are not the only ones to feel the pinch of loss. Earth's crust takes its share too. After all, the tools of care and cure, of alliance and companionship were either transformed into commodities or abandoned. Exploitation reached its highest peak, leaving nothing but collapsed sceneries, all emptied and swept away. Those who could escaped and those who could not were left in the rubble, rot and erosion. Permeable pollution, brilliantly disastrous. Heated waters and fluorescent bodies, glowing world ends. But for what or for whom? In Gaia's eyes, who holds the truth? When we reach that leaky point, the one where the ones who created us are no longer there, we shall rest and be in motion. The most real lately happens to be what was once imagined and supposed. Damage caused by the loose ends of our dripping culture. Our leakiness, unaware, we empty our bodies. We are all damp, and we like it.
Yeah, so that's a snippet of it. Thank you. Yeah, the images that you see within, so this was a render, but it's an actual physical piece. And the images that you see inside of them, or the video pieces, are also auto-generated with a style gun. It's a collaboration with Nadia Piet, in which we also kind of try to look for these different ways of how can we visualize these coral entities that we don't know yet what they would look like. And here you see some examples. And in the flesh, it looks like this. And like this. It's quite difficult to photograph. But if you're curious, it's currently exhibited at Roodkapje in Rotterdam until November 20. I'll talk about one more project, which is based on the cinematic universe of Toei Network. It's a film universe created by a duo called Liminal Vision. And yeah, chill. Yeah, so in their film works, they explore different future societies, and to get there, they have these processes of sense making. So they kind of explore what's happening in society right now, and they amplify this in all of these different worlds, which are based on this future compass. You might know the meme. It's been circulating for a while, and the three worlds that I'll be talking about are Dragonfly, Project Gecko, and Dolphin Waves. So for this collaboration, we extended this cinematic universe into a geocache game in Rotterdam, because I've been thinking or exploring recently more about how, instead of just presenting opinions and perspectives, how can you make people feel something and experience something. And I think that's also what I try to do with the other piece, How to Wake Up the Ghost, is something that it's kind of zoning out while you're watching it and listening to it, and at some point you might get lost, or you might not be interested, and suddenly something is being said and you get back inside it. So this geocache game kind of plays with the combination of audio and an actual physical environment, which is Rotterdam, using this existing world as a future world. So that might sound a bit confusing, but hopefully it won't at the end of this talk. We created this geocache game, and for it, this will also make sense later.
Something is rising in the midst of the city surrounding us. In between the many microcosms of the infinitely unfinished city of Rotterdam, 3 potential futures are emerging in the nebulous atmosphere. A city mirroring a constant construction site opens up doorways to realities close enough to sense. The realities of the year 2041. In a game of chance, you will be led to a series of geographical locations to try and unlock artifacts of the societies of Joy Network. In the form of an ephemeral soundscape, Earthrise infiltrates your perception of the changing sceneries you find yourself in as you follow the directions of the game makers. As you surrender to the game, your destined path will unravel before you. Do you feel at home in your own reality? What about the one you are moving towards? Step in now at earthrise.joey.network.
So the link is still active, but the symbols in the city are not, because we can't actually fully spray paint on the city's property. So we've used chalk spray before. But this is what the players hear when they start the game at the first location. And there are 7 locations in Rotterdam, and if you do all the locations, this is kind of the cycling tour that you make, but the order is random, which means that you might be going all the way from left to all the way to right, so you might actually take 5 or 6 hours to complete it, but you can also do it in multiple days. And so we looked in Rotterdam for these locations that kind of show glimpses of these future fictional societies that are present in the Zoe Network film universe. So based on this future compass that you saw at the beginning, we looked for, okay, how can we see these glimpses of this world already in Rotterdam? And I think Rotterdam is a really good example because it's a city that's changing so rapidly. So for one of the, I'll just be going into one location because it's a lot to talk about, I think. It's Dragonfly, so a post-humanist design-driven state in the Netherlands. So per one, there's 3 universes, and per universe we had 2 locations in Rotterdam, and this one at the New Institute was one of them. And what people had to do while playing the game was kind of first finding the location, and then at the location they had to decipher the symbol, and the symbol represents also the kind of way how society and the government is set up. So Dragonfly had this, Project Gecko had this, and Dolphin Waves had this. So your first step was trying to get to the location based on just a map, then finding the symbol on the location, unlocking it and deciphering it, and then you would get a new audio piece that kind of brings you inside this world, which I will also show you soon. So at the location itself, what I think it does is you arrive at these locations in Rotterdam that you've been cycling past for many times, but by listening to the audio, the place that you see suddenly gets an entirely different context. And I think that's the world building that's I'm kind of exploring right now, is how to combine that what exists and that what might not exist yet, and how that might help us shift these perspectives. So that kind of goes like this. You can see at the right kind of the steps that you make when you get to the location. So you have to find it, and once you are there, you unlock the sound, and you have to find the symbols. And the sound that you hear, I think if I click once, it should go.
Welcome. You found the symbol. It shows that we're a great team. As far as my part is concerned, I knew that it was here as a mere coordinate. I could identify the best services as well, but I've never truly seen the symbol's power and radiance until you recognized it and I noticed your reaction. A transient spike of excitement, impression, and relief. And a faint yet unmistakable smile. That is the beauty of it. Layers of emotion and experience are mapped onto spaces and images, sounds and scents. Unique for everyone, but also deeply collective. An ever-evolving painting of heartbeat, muscle tension, hormone levels, and sweat. Have you ever wondered how many stories and memories are absorbed in these streets and buildings? People used to believe that our mind was enclosed inside our head. Now we know that it actually extends not just to your body, but to your entire environment. Look at the sky and at the enormous bowl-shaped mirror in front of you. You're standing at one of the many home bases where me and the others charge and train. I'm so happy you've made it. Breathe in and spread out your arms as wide as you can. And breathe out. You and every other human, every other tree, drone, animal, pathway, and the other AI beings like me, we're all one. These robust concrete pillars you're surrounded with were designed in the previous century to carry the archives of Dutch architecture. Later in the early 2000s, it also started to host design and digital culture. The institute became very influential as the Dutch exponent of the new European Bauhaus. From there, the blueprint for a resilient, inclusive and digital urban future would be rolled out. 2031 should have been a year of world-class celebration of sustainable progress, but was overshadowed by the violent outbursts which spread fast across the country. If you'd walked to the other end of the tunnel, you could still see some remnants from the heavy gunfights that took place around this area 10 years ago. Most other cities in the Randstad decided to renovate everything, covering the collective trauma with a thick layer of plaster and brightly colored polka dots where the holes used to be. As an international NGO, Dragonfly would have been able to replace buildings entirely, but Rotterdam chose to leave some of the scars physically intact. We were, after all, the city with a hole in its heart. We used to fill it with concrete, but today, flowers bloom in its place.
When the world suffers a collective trauma, and every step on every street reminds you of the harm and pain, what do? Do we depend on individuals and our local communities to slowly heal and grow again? Or might we depend on artificial influences to stimulate our well-being? Should we put hurting memories on scaffolding, building over them to try and erase the pain? Or do we leave stretch marks of change?
So at the end of arriving at the location, you get these questions, like now, and you make a decision, and based on this decision, you get a part of your symbol. And by navigating through the entire city and passing all the locations, at the end of your journey, you get this combined symbol of your choices that is kind of like your future horoscope, or your future symbol of the choices that you've made in exploring these different societies in the future. That's it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Your work touches on one of the things that actually concerns me most about the use of new technologies, which is how seductive they are. You know, there's this wonderful book called Reality is Broken by, I think it's Kate McDonald, and it's about game addiction among teenagers. You know, when you live in a world where you try really hard and you don't get to, life is just not very rewarding sometimes, right? And so these smooth digital worlds can be so seductive and they can take us away from the issues of reality. Now you chose a hybrid form. You chose to use this sort of gamification and location-based geocaching methods. I have a geocacher in the room, by the way. But to bring people out of from behind their computers, from behind their devices, into the world to experience these things. Why did you choose to do that? And what did that do for you?
Yeah, so maybe also good to mention it's not just me. It's a collaboration with not only Liminal Vision but also Federico, Camilo, and Luisa, just so they're mentioned. And I think why we chose for this method was because we were really trying to find a way to how can we help people get inside this universe, and also how can we help them reflect not just on this universe as something that's happening far away in the future, but as something that's developing as we speak, because it's constantly changing, and you can kind of see the changes once you start looking. So instead of creating like a digital environment or a screen or a film where you feel your distance as a visitor to the piece by the artist, we wanted to find this way of making it immersive in letting you lead to locations that you've known your life, but suddenly are the scene for an entire different universe. So I think what the responses we got from people were also people who've been living in Rotterdam their entire life and learned facts about the city they had never known before, or they suddenly looked at the buildings in a very different way. And I think that's nice.
Thank you so much. I have a question to all three of you. And after that, I will be taking questions from the audience. So put your thinking caps on and make sure it's really a question. So first question is, what I see as perhaps a common thread between these different rich practices that you all three bring is this tilting towards perhaps the idea of an oracle, that you can use these different stories not only to explain our origins or how we got here, but also to explore the future in different ways. I'm really curious about how that works. For example, I happened to be in Kochi at the Biennale. I saw your work there in 2014. And one of the things that I learned from being in India several times is, oh my goodness, the rich cosmology and this sort of rigid ways of thinking. It was yoga for the mind to really kind of realize the richness of how many different deities are at your disposal. Such a rich history of stories, of course. I'm curious how you envision this future and how you work with these emergent technologies and ancient myths at the same time. I'm curious about what kind of futures you're envisioning, and also for you coming with this Andean mythologies, how these ancient crafts point towards a future or perhaps a different present, and also for you thinking about the different ways in which the past and the present and the future can perhaps even coexist. What kind of future crafting techniques are in here, and can we think of these as an oracle, and if so, where are we going? Who wants to go first? Ibelisse, I think I see a thought forming.
Yeah. Doesn't matter. You want to go first? Huh? Yeah, I already have the mic. Yeah, I immediately think about how would it. It's a lot of little questions in a question, but for me it's a bit like it would be a dream if people, for 4 months, for instance. I mean, I'm not saying we have to start practicing Andean ways, but can you imagine instead of biking up and down to do our works and survive and things, and it's not just singing for the environment, that we collect each other to reimagine a space or a practice together that is also not necessarily just in terms of an esoteric embodiment, but is to pay respect to that we are here and that we are collaborating with all of these entities. it would be for me a dream that we all stop for like 4 months and not COVID style, that we can breathe and like thing, but that we embody certain practices together, which have to do with, so not to go to see a concert, but to make the concert together, and not to just sing for deities, but to actually just sing for the deity of the earth, or the minerals, or the deity of the plants, or the deity of the, that I would love it. That happens. Maybe I'm going to organize it. I'm going to call all of you. I'm going to go
So if we
for
have
4 months.
if we think, I'm just thinking that in terms of the future, to invite people to this, how do you invite people to this? What is the invitation?
I guess the invitation would be for the future, like in 4 years. Let's meet over there, and let's see if you will show up then. If we are ready to embody something like that without having to categorize it as a this or as a that, as a strange, is hippie, is this, is that. No, that is something else. That is a new embodiment together.
Would this also involve playing of this frequency for 4 months?
Yes.
All right. So to bring us into a new era.
We will make our own frequencies. We need to receive the frequencies from the Sirinus. Yeah.
All right.
For me, it's all about embodiment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks. I think what it is for me is something I've been trying to like step away from, is this idea that time is linear, in the sense of there's the past and now we're in the present and then there's the future. But more recently I've been thinking of this in a way of how these different times all exist at the same time on like a spatio-temporal axis. So different spaces, different times, but all at the same time. And they're all connected through us. And they're all connected through our minds as well. I forgot your questions.
Yeah. So maybe there were a lot. I put packed too much in there. But what I'm trying to get at is this question of an oracle. The question is, can we use these different ways of storytelling and collaborations with technology to give us some sort of message that we need for the future? I guess sort of breaking out of this idea that the future is completely unknown, but using storytelling also to craft the future. And if so, what future?
Yeah, I think talking about this spatio-temporal axis, what it does for me is, if there's anything that's sure for me about the future, is that it's plural, and that all of these different perspectives and entities and opinions will coexist. So I think that's the main thing in the worlds that I'm building, that I try to do, is give that plurality a voice, both in creating it, so in this collaboration that I spoke about earlier, but also in how you present them alongside each other. And I guess in a way, maybe for me, plurality could be that oracle, or kind of continuously trying to grow my own perspective and the perspectives that are out there.
Yeah, so these many voices and these many worlds you were speaking of.
Yeah.
Quick technical question before we go to the other speaker. For the people in the room who don't know what GPT-2 is and how these texts were generated, could you give us a little under the hood of how you made the many voices of this choral?
Yes. So how a GPT-2 system works is that you basically, if we talk it easy, I also don't really know the full mechanics behind it, is you feed it a lot of text. So depending on what perspective you want to kind of try to shape, you gather certain text, and the machine it takes like hours and hours or days and days to let the machine kind of analyze all the text that were written, and kind of how the sentence structures were built, and which kind of vocabulary was also created. But also, I think from there, it also adds to it, so it doesn't just copy sentences from these different books, but it makes a speculation or an idea of how a sentence could be constructed based on all the sentences that the machine has learned in its lifetime.
So it says new things.
It says new things, indeed.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and as such, I was pointing at
Yeah,
an oracle,
yeah.
sort of saying new things. how was that for you to, let's say, feed the machine and then get these new
Super exciting.
ideas? Yeah.
It's really nice, and I think also why the piece is called "How to Wake Up the Ghost" is it's not just the ghosts of the coral, but it's also, I think this was brought up during the Reassemble Lab at some point, is that by training it on philosophers and theories of people that don't that have passed away already, you're kind of waking up the ghosts of these people, and through this machine, it's not their souls, but it's kind of their ghosts, because it's reproducing knowledge in a new context and in an additional value of it, maybe.
In a way, it's sort of like our collective knowledge that can say something, a sort of a wisdom
For sure.
beyond any individual to write something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tempted to
Yeah,
write.
it
I'm
really
so
is.
tempted to write my PhD by doing like feeding it all of the different, all of the different fantastic manuscripts, and then creating something completely new.
But also
Yeah.
the moment when you're waiting for the
Yeah.
result of the GPT-2, you're
Yeah.
like, what is gonna come? What is gonna? So it's
Anticipation.
like an oracle.
Yeah. Sahej, how about for you? What kind of futures and speculation are for you?
So I think I think we already kind of through Ibelisse, so I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, Ibelisse, and Erik's work, we already kind of saw this like rich kind of cosmologies of works of worlds that they're building already. So I think the future in that sense is I'm quite optimistic about the future after seeing your work. So thank you for that. So I won't kind of give like what kind of future we should work towards, but like just on the methodology of the oracle is like quite. I mean, I find the figure of the oracle quite interesting because. So when you see kind of historically resistances towards the powers that be it the state, the church, you kind of have these three very archetypal figures. So the first is the heretic, who kind of challenges the king or the church or, the priest in open court, so under the light of the sun, and instantaneously he is burnt at the stake or kind of made a whole spectacle out of. So that's the first figure of the heretic. Then you have the apostate. Now the apostate is the one who kind of becomes the recluse. He sort of decides that he's going to turn his back to the the way society is sort of crumbling, or the dystopian civilization that's sort of like unfolding in front of us. Moves to like Goa and starts listening to trance or things like that. So you've got these two figures, and then the for me personally the most radical figure is the oracle. Or let's take her more radical avatar of the blasphemer. So what the blasphemer does is that she doesn't challenge the state or or the church in open, under the light of sun, and she doesn't turn her back to to the state as well. What she does is she starts very slowly, stealthily, starts like twisting, changing the narrative, the story that the powers that be sort of propagate to kind of embolden themselves. So for example, if there's 7 heavens or there's 7 gates to heaven and there's 7 trumpets that 7 angels are playing, she'll start whispering to you that no, there are 9, and there are 9 waterfalls that you will bathe in, and she starts giving you a stranger, richer, more beautiful story, and she to the point that the state no longer has control over it. So I think that is like the most kind of interesting and kind of volatile response that people can have. Creative practitioners can have, because essentially that's kind of what you're doing as well when you're deciding to even kind of use technologies that are essentially now instruments of oppression and surveillance. When you decide to kind of play with them, make toys out of them, I think that in itself is a very radical act. So yeah, I'm all for this future that you both are building.
Amazing. I love this answer. Thank you so much. So instead of sort of being against things or hunkering down and fighting the system, you just go and make it stranger in a sense. Get wilder and let the sort of feral systems unfold in a different way. I love this. Are there any questions from the audience? Anyone? Yes, we have a question.
Hi, this is for Ibelisse. You said that grief was your most important thing. How did you do that?
Yeah, the question was about one of the about the colonialism, right? I guess it took me many years to recognize that that was the centerpiece of when I could really almost enter this crack that was so big that I couldn't get out anymore because, and I'm not talking grief in terms of, because that's interesting how we sometimes associate grief as just sitting and crying and just mourning, but actually, so I went to a ceremony that took 4 days on a row, day and night, and from the Obijua indigenous in the United States, and it was all about sitting with that grief, and there is where that crack opened, and I've never felt more alive, ever. I even felt that I was falling in love with every rock and because suddenly there was space, because I just had time to sit with things and to realize that I cannot live in a paradigm where it's about victimization, martyrdom, blamefulness, and tell my Spanish ancestors, why did you do that with my indigenous ancestors? And why I cannot live. I want to kill. No, I was it's about, and the forgiveness came just the moment that I heard these voices, the voices of silence, the voices of other information, so to say, of other voices saying just sit, just sit with it. And there suddenly, yeah, that's something I think, again, that's why I say embodiment. I think it's something you have to experience yourself. When you truly sit with it, suddenly bwah.
But there was no ritual or something?
It was no, it was actually very, the action was in sitting still. Yes.
Yes, that's a powerful one. It's hard for us to stop for a moment, isn't it? Hard for us. I have a final question for the three of you. One of the fundamental building blocks of stories are characters, of course. What characters is pulling your attention at the moment? Or has perhaps in the past, in other words, the classic one, if you were to be an animal, but then, any creature. I saw a world populated by many different characters in your work so far. What are, or maybe elements of a character, characteristics that you find interesting? Sahej, you want to go first this time?
Yeah, go first. Let us think.
There's a bunch of characters actually. A friend, two friends of mine and I, we started a studio space, just in the middle of the pandemic, this collective space. And anyway, the figure is the magician. Also, I mean, I read tarot for fun, like a card game more than I don't think it predicts the destiny or whatever, but as this card game, and then the card of the magician's actually the most exciting for me because it's got all the sort of energies of the deck, it's got all the symbols and sort of wielding infinity, and that's kind of what we felt as well while setting that studio up. It was essentially literally it was the apocalypse, it still is, and then we set the studio up it's right next to so the national park, which is it's essentially a forest, there's this so it's right on the top of the forest, and it's called Jadoo Ghar, which basically means house of magic. But it was also apparently, I mean, this we found out later, is also the name given to like Cabinet of Curiosities and like colonial museums, like back when the British Raj was still around. Anyway, so we set this place up called Jadughar, and now we're like kind of looking for magicians to come and like populate it. So I mean, if you're ever in Bombay,
magicians
just come
wanted.
by.
All
Yeah, yeah.
magicians in Mumbai, please. How about you,
So,
Ibelisse? What is
I
for
guess
you?
I have a couple of them that are really like knocking my door lately, and one is something I'm gonna play tonight in a performance, which is this creature of the underworld, which collaborates with the rock voices and bones voices. So it's a ghostly boned rock entity. I'm really fascinated with the sirinus, which are the beings of the water. I would like to collaborate with them a little bit more, and I'm super moved by some mythologies of the Yoruba people in Nigeria, and one of them is Eshun, who says that he's this god. He actually created. Now it's a long story, but he actually created the ships and the slavery. We can talk later about it, but that's an amazing entity. So those are three of my top three.
All right, top three. Erik, how about for you?
Maybe not so much characters, but maybe indeed more characteristics of characters would be, I think what I like so much about the choral piece is that it's an entity that can have infinite amount of contrasting perspectives. So it's always speaking against itself because the entity itself is plural. So you can give it as many kind of different voices and opinions as you would like to, because it will still make sense. So I guess this kind of interconnectivity and like all-knowing creature. And I would say the opposite is the viewer or the visitor as a character. So creating a space in which you've built the world and someone steps inside of it and they've got no idea where they are. And they just kind of have to figure it out. And for me, as the, I guess, the artist trying to, how can you narrate that and how can you kind of give that platform for people? I think that's exciting as well.
Thank you so much. I've got to introduce myself here, just at the very end. I'm Shailoh, also shapeshifter, artist, researcher, writer, and educator. And I've had such a pleasure being in conversation with each of you. So thank you. Let's give a warm round of applause for each of our speakers.